going here, or once the record button's clicked. Just for everybody's knowledge, these meetings are the advisory committee or advisory group are always publicly noticed and recorded. So that's what we're doing now.
All right. Did everyone see the message? The recording has started.
Yes. And then I just saw Jack Williams showed in the queue. So, okay, good. Jack, good morning. Okay, well, let's kick it off.
Bob Zyback, can I ask you to mute your video, please? We like seeing you, but this is just the advisory group that we want to see this morning. So if you can stay on, but just turn your video off, that'd be great.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Okay, well, good morning, everybody. So this is May 30th, and this is a meeting of the Elliott State Forest Advisory Group to Department of State lands around the creation of the Elliott State Research Forest. And I'm Brett Brownscombe. I'm working for DSL as the Elliott State Research Forest Elliott State Forest Transition Director, transition to the Research Forest. And before we go into the initial opening remarks, I wanted to just flash the agenda on the screen real quick. And here we go. So here's our proposed agenda for the day. I think Vicki will touch on this in some of the opening remarks. We may not need the full 2 hours on this. We're still in conversations with land board offices around some of the matters related to the June 11th land board meeting. And so we still need to have or tie off some of the conversations there before being able to get into some level of detail on some of these items. But there is a lot going on in the Elliott and a lot to talk about with the advisory group. And I wanted to turn it over to you, Vicki, as DSL director, as well as Keith and Jack, to do some welcoming opening remarks, anything you all want to say to kind of set the table for today.
All right. Good morning, everyone. It's good to see you. Yesterday, I unplugged. I would highly advise taking a day to do that. May is the mental health month, but yesterday was also my birthday. So I decided that it was important for me, for my mental health, to take the day off and unplug. It was great. So I feel refreshed. I'm ready to go. And as Brett said, there is a whole heck of a lot going on in the Elliott. As usual, there's a lot going on in our department. So don't think that the Elliott's the only thing I have to work on. And all of you too have other jobs and other interests. So I really appreciate it. And Mike, I know I really appreciate that you aren't going away anytime soon. You've been asked to stay on a little bit longer. I have given my hard date of July 1, 2025. We'll see what happens when we get closer, but I'm pretty certain that's going to stay. So let me just recognize that all systems are go. We're really busy working on the Elliott budgets, the forest management plan. That is expected to be out this week, though, Brett, by Friday, by tomorrow. Every week I say it's got to go out this week, and you know, other things come up with regard to that plan, but at some point we need to get it moving. We've been working on the operations plan. We'll have an update for you on that, on the startup funding, our board appointments, and even more than that. So Brett and I, part of why I needed the day off yesterday, we went to Washington, D.C. last week. And just before I did that, I was 2 days at the South Slough for a 50th anniversary celebration for the South Slough's creation. and left at 5 a.m. on Monday morning and got home at midnight on Thursday. So it was a busy week in Washington, D.C. We met with our congressional offices. We met with various agencies, and just really we're trying to hustle up some dollars. And I also had a meeting after Brett left. I had a meeting with NOAA regarding another issue we have at the department, which is our abandoned and derelict vessels. So it was a long week. I want to let you know also, I'm sure you all do, that the land board is meeting June 11th. This is another reason why our life has been very hectic. Pre-land board is filled with a lot of work. Not only the agenda items that need to be tidied up and reviewed by multiple people, but we also meet with the land board assistants. We had that meeting while I was in DC, and things come up in those meetings regarding the various items on the agenda. So we've been working with the land board assistants on answering some questions that came up, and we have another meeting tomorrow afternoon to tie down a lot of that work around our budget asks, around the Elliott, and other things. So we can't really share too much with you yet today because we don't know a lot, other than it is my full expectation that we will be appointing the board at the June meeting. They're still reviewing some of the applications, and we're going through some other work regarding that. And I want to thank those of you who had to go through the whole background check process again. Unfortunately, it's required, and it's gotten easier than it used to be, but I know it took some of your time. So mostly today, we're going to get a lot of updates. I did see the article that Brett sent out this morning, and I just reviewed it very cursorily while we were getting ready for this meeting. And they did say that the advisory committee was disbanded at the end of 22, and that wasn't correct. It was just renamed. So I don't know if they finished their review of their study at that time or what happened. But anyway, there are comments from advisory group members in there. They don't name who you are, at least what I could see, but I think it's really great. And I want to hear how the New York case is different or similar to ours. So today is the last official day of what we've started out as an advisory committee and now an advisory group. And so the next time, I think everyone on my screen, most everyone on my screen will be an official board member, which is pretty exciting, that you actually get to make some decisions. You've had the ability to make decisions, but I know some of you feel like, well, my decision is just advisory and you don't care, but we do care. And it has really gone into this whole construct of developing a research forest. So for that, I want to thank all of you. Other than that, I have nothing else to add unless anyone has any questions, and then I'll move it over to the next person who's going to provide some updates. Any questions before we move on? Bob, I hope your trip to Ireland was wonderful.
It was really great. Thank you.
I'd love to see pictures of the birds.
Lots of birds, lots of birds.
Yeah, that's, it would be nice. That's a mental health break, is to go on a birding vacation. So hope you
Absolutely.
enjoyed it.
And you'll be happy to know that I'm rebuilding the tree house as well, so we can start to do Zoom meetings from there again.
Oh, there you go. Good deal. I love
All
that
right, well,
tree
that's good to
house.
know there's more than beer and sheep and potatoes in Ireland. And before we go down that track a little further, I wanted to shift to Keith and Jack for any opening remarks, and then come back, Vicky. Well, I guess first off, any questions, any high-level questions from you all for Vicky before we shift to Jack and Keith for opening remarks, and then anything else from remarks from board members we'll go to next, or advisory group members.
Okay, let's hear
Thanks,
from
Vicky,
our
for that.
illustrious co-chairs.
Yeah, thanks for setting the stage, Vicky. And yeah, Keith, Jack,
Keith,
is it in your world?
we're closing in on the end of the school year, Keith.
Yeah. I know we're down to, I had a good day yesterday. Senator Wyden was in the building with a town hall and our seniors and juniors. It's about the fourth time he's come. It was great. Seniors are down to, I just spoke to a group this morning and they're down to 4.5 days. Next Wednesday, they get to be there for an hour and then we go to the graduation practice. So they are short timers. I was going to say in terms of the application that we had to resend, I used Bob Salinger and Vicky Walker as references, and I was told one of those was good and one of those was not, and I'm not sure which is which. So I don't want to know anymore. And my only comment is that I've long felt that the least appreciated of all the Beatles songs and absolutely my favorite of theirs is "The Long and Winding Road," and that might be an appropriate theme for the Elliott State Research Forest. And I'll stop. I'm beginning to date myself, aren't I? Vicky and Bob and Jack and I, we remember when Let It Be was out. So
yeah, absolutely loved it. And when I turned 64, we have a group of staffers called the Water Beatles. They call themselves the Water Beatles, and they sing songs at our events. And I asked if they could do the Beatles song "When I'm 64." Well, that was during COVID. So I never got my Beatles song because they change up the words to match, what needs to be said. So anyway, I love the Beatles. It's great. So yes, I agree with you. It has been a long and winding road, but I actually, I'm pretty excited. I think we've really made some humongous progress. If humongous is a word that I can use.
I'm an English teacher. It is.
Okay, Jack.
And that's it for me.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Yeah, humongous works too. Long and Winding Road works too. And happy belated birthday, Vicky. That's cool. Yeah, glad to be here today. This may be about my last board meeting. I'll be very sorry to leave the crew, but I do have some ideas, some thoughts about some of the things as we get into the FMP discussion, perhaps, and some others today. So I'm kind of looking forward to getting some updates and trying to help out a little bit to move the ship forward. So yeah, just good morning. Glad to be here.
Thanks, Keith and Jack. And any other high-level reflections from any others on the advisory group? Important things to flag related to your life in the Elliott, not necessarily your vacation life, but your work life in the Elliott. Okay. Well, we'll keep moving. I'm going to reflash the agenda really quick. So where we're going from here is a variety of updates, and there are a few more to add to this. And I'll kick it off. Ryan and Bill and Allie are here to help on some of these, and then we'll shift to a high-level update on the FMP, followed by kind of advanced heads up what's coming on the June Land Board meeting agenda, and then we'll finish up with public comment, and anybody in the queue who wants to comment is welcome, and we'll try to manage our time accordingly. The one thing I wanted to hit on really quick, I'll post this in the chat. Vicky mentioned what I had sent recently or last night. There was an article, a Journal of Forestry article published around a comparative study of the Elliott State Research Forest process and the different case study in New York State. And it's related to development of, I think it's called development of political identity in the context of state forest advisory groups. And it's kind of interesting, like Vicky said, not everything that anybody writes, even in academic peer-reviewed journals, is always accurate. So there were a few things in there that, yeah, I think Vicky flagged one of them, but overall just for the general public who wasn't on that email chain, I'll post it in the chat so you can see what was mentioned there. Okay, so moving on. High level overview on updates. So our proposed state budget, we are working on our agency request budget for the entire agency. And I know Jean's out on leave today. And this is one of the items that, because it relates to the whole of DSL and how it fits into the larger state enterprise, executive branch enterprise, this is still an ongoing conversation with the land board offices. And then on our Elliott related piece of this, our intention is to move forward with a budget that helps us move through the startup cost phase of setting up the Elliott State Research Forest. And so, as you all know, we both in the 2023 and then last legislative session received funding that helps with the startup costs related to staffing out the program at DSL for management of the Elliott State Research Forest, but also how it integrates with research, and then funding for a lot of the operations costs, which are no short. They're no short order. I mean, I think when you look at the cost of wildfire protection, HCP monitoring and compliance, plus road maintenance, those costs in and of themselves are above 1.5 million annually. And then that's, in addition to that, is all of the things that we are proposing to do contracting out. So, not doing it in-house by building staff within DSL, but contracted out to private sector and other entities around getting management going on the Elliott in 2025. But the budget ask for 2025 to 27, which will play out in the next legislative session, starts with the agency request budget, which is still an ongoing conversation that we'll talk more about at the land board meeting on June 11th. And then it moves from there into the process of developing the governor's recommended budget later in the fall of this year. And then it moves into the legislature. The governor proposes, the legislature disposes. And so where this all lands will be a matter of the 2025 legislative session deliberations. So I think stay tuned there. And I'll pause after every one of these updates, just so we can take any questions or hear any discussion that you all might want to have. I think part of the idea today is update you all, but also make sure we're asking and hearing what you're thinking or any thoughts and reactions. Okay, we'll give it a pause and then move on. Next up on updates is our management structure and then hiring process. So with the legislative funding from last session, we now have authority and funding to move forward with initial hiring on Elliott program staff. And so we're in the midst of position description development on critical positions related to the manager for the research forest, also the forester, the lead forester for the Elliott State Research Forest, biologist, executive assistant, and a communication or a policy and partnership engagement position. And that last one is a really critical piece of needed capacity around, for the Elliott to work as intended. It really is going to be about building partnership, and we are, limited in our capacity now. And so our intent is to get the hiring process going this summer on those positions, probably leading with prioritizing that partnership and community engagement position And while we do that, we're, rolling on other fronts with forest management plan development, operations plan development, including with contracted help. So Ryan's been fully engaged on that front, and we'll talk about that update in a second. But I guess the short of it is exciting times, because we have the wherewithal to start to build and actually see a program forward around management of the Elliott, and then get operations going in 2025, which has been a long time in coming. And I wanted to see, Bill, if you had anything to add on that, just from your seat on the operations end at all.
Yeah, thank you, Brett. Good morning, everybody. You actually did a really good job of covering that. It's really just a matter of working through the legislative process for the full funding and the timing of when those monies would be available, and the timing of when we'll be hiring what positions. But at this point, we're hoping to hire some initial positions to kind of get the program running, to start up. And so hiring that community engagement and policy position to help us with our public engagement process, as well as administrative support person, and then the forest manager, hoping to hire those this year before going into the next budget cycle.
Thanks, Bill. Anybody questions, reactions, anything on that brief update? There's Bob. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, no, all of that's helpful. I think two things. One, I just continue to, I appreciate your comments on, the budget and the growing budget, but I continue to think that, we need to do everything we can to hold the line early and expand later. I just think that we, sort of the same conversation we've had for the last year and a half about it's easy for these things to blow up, and it's easy to think that we need everything. And then it's easy to not be able to back away from that down the road. It's always easier to grow than it is to shrink. And I really think we need to continue to be conservative. We can hit the ground running hard in 2025 and build in as we go and understand and get our things like carbon credits and other sources. So I just want to keep putting my thumb on that scale, because I think, I think bare minimum is smart. And we all have different definitions of what that means. The other thing, and I'm sorry, I'm a little multitasking while you're talking, I apologize. So the FMP is coming out for public review. When does it, so when is it going to be final though?
It's going to go to the land board in October.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, we had, it became clear that we needed more time for public engagement and excuse me, and tribal consultation. So October is the land board meeting where that will be voted on.
Okay, but it's going to be released publicly. The draft is going to be released publicly in the next couple of days. Okay.
Yeah, it should be released tomorrow. And then there'll be a series of public meetings to talk about it, but we don't have those laid out yet. We're going to use our contractor ICF to do that, but we're still working on some loose ends with regard to that.
Yeah, and we'll get into this a bit more on that agenda item.
Okay.
I see Jack has his hand up. Were you done, Bob?
Only that I just want to make sure that we continue, because obviously, these things tier. There's the HCP, there's the FMP, and there's the annual operations plans, and they should all line up ladder or vertically to some degree. And so I appreciate the timeline. I agree with that. I don't think we can get it done sooner, but we need to make sure that the operations plan syncs up to that effectively.
Yeah, I agree. And that's all on our minds. And I also want to speak to your comment about holding the line and expanding later. The land board assistants agree with that. We agree with that. So that's one of the things that we talked about with the advisory group was what positions do you think are the most important to have right out of the gate, and the rest of them can be added along as we move along. So, okay, Jack.
Yeah,
Sorry,
thank you.
Brett.
I agree. I'm glad to hear the progress on the positions. I mean, I think that's something we've been looking for a while. And I'm also cognizant of I guess the need to kind of go slow on some of these, or that we can't just hit the ground running completely. And in that vein, I know I was one of the people kind of pushing for a kind of a research coordinator person early on, and maybe that just doesn't fit the bill. But I was wondering if in our partner position that we could also think of that as a little bit more science or research with a background in that as well, or kind of try to feature that a little bit in the position description. That might help out if we do get some research projects going sooner than later. That person might be able to just try just encouraging the thought that position would be kind of broad and could also help out on some of the research front.
I think that's a great thought. Yeah, thanks, Jack. I mean, and some of this is, Bob, you recognized everybody has a different definition of what modest is. I mean, where we're coming in is talking about managing the Elliott as a research forest and as an agency that does management, not an agency that is a research entity. The research side of this is important. And so some of the position staffing that is proposed around the research coordinator, as well as Jack, what you're mentioning around the policy and partnership coordinator or engagement position, I mean, they are really important as we play out the conversations around lead research partner and entity. And overall, we're coming in with a kind of, we're absorbing a lot of costs on operations by asking existing capacity at DSL on things like IT and human resources to engage. And we're not looking for new money there, but it doesn't mean that isn't work on people who are already working pretty hard. And then we're also overall coming in, we're looking at contracting out a lot of work, which is a relevant thing around the local community economy and jobs front, but also just bringing in competencies that exist in the private sector. We're still coming in well below where the budget conversations were in the OSU management budget options. And so I hear you, Bob, but I'm worried about the push to stay lean is good, but focusing on giving this what it needs to work and not taxing existing staff capacity beyond what would be viable to keep them able to make this work is the other side of it.
No, I think we're saying the same thing, Brett. I hear you. I mean, I worked my whole life in the nonprofit sector where you get very used to getting everything done with a quarter of what you need. And that's on a good day. And I'm not expecting us to do that here. I understand the dynamics are different in a publicly owned forest, but still, I think this is a real opportunity, without disagreeing with anything you said, to really be very thoughtful and careful as we grow and to build thoughtfully, because there are other sources of money that we can start to bring in. And I think, and we know that the how those get framed up affects where they go to and whether we're even eligible for them and other things as well. And I think on the flip side, we have the paradigm of the common school fund situation where we were in this constant, death struggle with trying to get timber to raise revenue to do the things we need to do. And I think we just need to keep those two dynamics really in mind as we go through this, so that we don't wind up in that death struggle again, where every budget and every operations plan is basically a battlefield over how do we get enough to, do what we need to do so we can get enough to do what we need to do the next cycle.
Yeah.
We don't need to really ever be there again. And I think I just constantly think back to, $221 million basically to buy ourselves flexibility so we never have to have that battle again under this farce. And that kind of, for me, is always kind of the thing flashing in the back of my brain.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. That's helpful. All right, I'm just trying to read the virtual room to see if anybody wants to jump in on the thread. Okay.
Yeah, I'll jump in one real quickly, Brad. And so if we birth in 2025 and we have sales of some sort in out to bid in 2025, we're looking at revenue from those probably in 2027, right? Maybe 2026.
Yeah, and we'll get into this a little more when Ryan updates on the operations planning side, but yeah, short answer, yes. 2027, 2020, sorry, did you say 2026 or 2027?
I said 2027, I thought, and then maybe late 2026 might fit in, right?
Yeah, let's put a pin in that, and I'll ask Ryan to kind of keep that in mind as he's talking through the operations plan. I think realistically 2027.
Okay.
But
that's good.
Ryan can kind of, when he does the update, shed a little his thoughts on how viable late 2026 would be.
But we are gonna cut our ceremonial tree before that. Just saying.
Okay, so a couple other updates are, before getting to Ryan on operations planning. Really quick, the habitat conservation plan. So where we are on that is still in the process of negotiating to a final with the federal services, National Marine Fisheries Service and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, who have jurisdiction to issue the legal permits under the Endangered Species Act for take. And we submitted our final and revisions to the federal agency comments. What we've gotten their comments back and reply to our comments. We're not seeing anything that really shakes the boat or is pushing for a redo on anything, or negotiation on the federal end for more protections or commitments on our end. So it feels like we're in a good spot of keeping things moving, with the outcome being issuance of a final record decision on the NEPA and the environmental impact statement end, and issuance separate from that of permits in the Endangered Species Act by the end of this year. The other update on that front is the ongoing consultation between U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Confederated Tribes of the Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians is ongoing, but there's been enough back and forth at different levels there on that consultation that I think we're clear. We've wanted to respect the process at DSL and for the tribe and U.S. Fish to play out the consultation as they see fit. And they've both been kind of feeding back on, here's the desire, here's what the asks are. And some of that, I think, can be reflected in the forest management plan. A lot of the asks seem to be focused on either species or issues that are not necessarily Endangered Species Act issues. So it's partly reflection on the importance of the next phase of the work, which is at the forest management plan level. But that consultation is playing out in the context of the review of our application for permits. And I don't think there's anything else to really update on the HCP.
Only that one of our meetings was with US Fish. And it was a really good meeting.
Oh, in DC, you're saying, Vicky?
Yeah. We met with the deputy, we met with the director, we met with staff. It was really good, and they were really helpful in helping us try to find places where we could find money, because they were given direction to help assist us in that way. And so we got some really good ideas from them. Matt Strickler indicated that he has a lot of money on the recreation side. And, we haven't talked about that as much because we're still working on getting the forest started. But recreation is still a pretty big component of the whole entire Elliott plan. So we might find some planning dollars with regard to that and some other areas. So anyway, we spent a lot of time at US Fish. It was good.
Yeah.
Hey, Vicky,
Yeah.
what do those recreation dollars look like, and what limitations come with them? And I'm thinking about road maintenance, because recreation on the Elliott is going to require road maintenance. And is there a way to defer or cover some of our road maintenance costs through a grant like that?
I don't know, Keith. It's a good question. Matt brought all those things up with us, and we've only been home less than a week, so I don't know the answer. We were going to put together a list, and he's going to put together a list. I just know he said he's got millions in the recreation component, and how that's defined depends on the grants. You got to look at the requirements under the grant, but I would think that would be part of developing the recreation. I mean, it's been my intent that we develop campsites, real campsites, not those ones where people take their 4x4 and go down a little trail and make a campsite along the river. That's all well and good, but I recall this one really great place near the Millicoma that just screamed for a really wonderful campground. And other things, we heard a presentation way early on when we all first started about zip lining and things like that, because as you know, the Elliott is very like this. And it makes it difficult for regular recreation in the Elliott. Hiking, when people say they hike, I'm like, where are you hiking? But there's a lot of opportunity. It's just we're not super focused on that right now because we need to get it up and running and making some money. But if they have federal money available, we're going to go after it. And that's hopefully the board, can help us work on issues like that as well.
And part of what's teed up, like part of this is cart and horse, where the planning for recreation, intentional planning and having a recreation plan done needs to happen before we can tap into some of the big dollars that I think Vicky's mentioning are tied to actual implementation through federal resources provided through states. And the part of what would be helpful to do with the Elliott is to work with, I think it's State Parks and Recreation Department that does the SCORP, and I'm not even going to try on the acronym, but it's basically the state plan for recreational planning statewide, and some of the priorities relate to dispersed and non-dispersed recreation and then underserved communities. And so how the Elliott fits as a dispersed recreation opportunity in an area where we can highlight the needs for all of the things that came up around the push to keep the Elliott public, and the reasons for the importance of public lands and dispersed recreation opportunities on the South Coast will be relevant to, I think, some of those bigger dollars. But the horse part of this, or the cart and the horse part of this, is getting that recreation plan done first, which, as Vicky said, is a placeholder as part of the forest management plan that we need to integrate in as an intentional kind of next step planning effort. So sorry to belabor that one, but it felt like that was a good back and forth. And for any of you guys who are agenda sticklers, don't worry about the time on the agenda. I think getting through a lot of these updates with some discussion is helpful and important. And then we're gonna, I think, make up some time in the other items. So with that, I wanted to turn it to you in a second, Ryan, on operations planning. But one thing Vicki mentioned reminded me. So the context of the DC trip and money is budgeting for the startup funds for the Elliott. And I had asked Bill to help with the overall presentation around budget development on the Elliott, and then I realized I just blew right through that in my opening updates. So I wanted to say one thing on the federal funding front, but first ask Bill, is there anything that you had or wanted to add on the budget development process, or did I hit it? And
No, you covered it.
All
You're covering it at a high level, and you did well. And you and Vicky can talk better about what you talked with Fish and Wildlife Service in DC than I can. So
yeah, and thanks, Bill. Sorry for blowing right through that one.
No
despite
worries.
my email to you yesterday. So we have on the federal funding ask, we have 3 requests in, one related to Shutter Creek, one related to state and private forestry, which is in Department of Agriculture, Forest Service. And that one relates to funding to stand up recreation planning, as well as funding for more of the research related monitoring and setup of actual research projects. And then the third one is programmatic language requests on both the NOAA fisheries end, but also the Department of Interior budget end, related to their assistance with federal money to help with outcomes on the Elliott that relate to federal species. I mean, recognizing that the state has primary jurisdiction over wildlife, and on the Elliott habitat too, but in the context of federal endangered species listing and species getting federalized, there's as we see it, a federal role and interest in the conservation and recovery of species that goes beyond what the state can and should do. And so we have language in the spending bill that was passed by Congress and signed by the president. It's programmatic language in the Interior bill to assist funding on the Elliott related to northern spotted owl and marbled mirrolets. And how that plays out in terms of real money and how it fits within the realities of U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's budget and the reality of we can't fund HCP mitigation or take offset commitments with federal money. There is a lot of other, outside of that, there are a lot of other avenues that we're looking to explore with U.S. Fish state and regional staff around how to advance the state's interests and your interests and the public's interest in the Elliott and their interests and their mission around species and habitat and research. So part of what we came away from the DC trip with was we have real direction from Congress, and the check-in with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was how do we make that real within their realities, and it's something we'll play forward in the kind of next steps over the course of this year. So with that, I wanted to shift to operations planning, and Ryan, we're at a point, I think, just for Ryan to give a brief high-level update, knowing that there's going to be more to come on this at future board meetings based on our process for both the FMP and the operations plan. So Ryan, if I could turn it to you, bring other voices in, that would be great.
Yeah, well, I think we're going to scrap the ops plan and just go zip lining in the Elliott. I mean, we don't need to got trees now. We're just gonna zip line. All right. So
Yeah, I've heard
I'll-
there are lucrative revenue streams tied to that, but not outside of Disneyland so much.
there you go. Yeah, and also bear with me. I'm recovering still from attending a Red Hot Chili Peppers concert, and so there's still some cobwebs there, maybe a little contact high. So my brain is mostly working, but we'll see if we can get through it. So we contracted with Farm Unlimited, primarily with Eric Farm, doing the operations plan, developing it. And so right now, I think you've heard this before, but we're in the kind of the initial stage of reviewing and selecting candidate stands and units to pull together. Initially, it was a GIS kind of office exercise, and then now it's starting to we're starting to get through that phase and get out in the field a little bit and operationalize those units. And to step back a little bit, what we're doing is looking at a mix of the various allocations. So a mix of extensive, intensive, the CRW thinnings, and then we're hoping to, although we haven't started this yet, we're hoping to also include in this operations plan some RCA thins. So we'd have to work with probably with OSU on that to make sure that we would conduct that in the correct manner. So we'd need some help there. But we're making progress. The idea with looking at places to go is we are limited based on, from the HCP and other restrictions on age class. So we're kind of narrowing down using these criteria. A lot of it is age class, especially with the intensives, is places to go. I think we had for a while talked about focusing mostly in the flexibles, but there's really not enough room to have enough candidate areas to go there. So we're going to be using all of the forest really to look for candidates. And if we did put too much pressure on the flexibles, I think we would not have enough really places to go in the future. I don't want to say so-called hammer the flexibles and then not have more opportunities in the future to do things like longer rotations and all these other things that we can do in the flexible sub-watershed. So we're looking sort of forest wide, not doing a shotgun approach. In other words, we're not just going to put units randomly all over the forest. We're going to try to cluster the areas. And right now we have selected about 20 different, Eric's calling them projects or clusters of areas to go, and then hopefully do a mix of treatments within those same areas. And so that's going pretty well. We've got a big list right now. And then, as you go through this process, there's going to be a lot of attrition, especially when you get out in the field and do more reconnaissance. So we're slowly paring things down, and then we're going to hit the field even harder coming up to really kind of come up with these different areas to develop the treatments. And what you guys will probably see in the future is a pretty big list, but it doesn't mean that's where we're going to have to go harvest everywhere, that all of these choices. We just want to have a pretty big list and then be able to pare down exactly where we'd want to go in then this first 2 years of the biennial operations plan. And I think Keith or somebody asked a question earlier about revenue. I think the goal would be to get the first set of timber sales sold in 2025. And then it just really is up to the purchaser. These would be on 2-year contracts. So some revenue could come in 2025. Some could come in 2026 or 2027. We just don't know, because you want to leave the flexibility to the purchaser of when they're going to harvest. And so it could all come, maybe they decide everything looks good with the markets and they harvest a bunch in 25, or maybe it's 26 or in 27, or maybe it's all three. We just don't know. So that revenue is just hard to predict when it's going to actually come in, but it will come in. As long as we get sales sold in 25, it will be coming in sometime certainly before the end of the calendar year of 27. A couple other things I'll mention is that we've had some limitations with the data we're using. And so this has been a little bit of a struggle. So we got a master GIS data set from ICF that's really tied to the HCP. When that data set came to us from an operations standpoint, there was over 9,600 different polygons. And then over 500, or actually 2,500 of those were less than an acre. So you have all these slivers in there. And long term, that's not how you want to manage. You don't want to manage having all these little bits and pieces. And so what happened is during all the different iterations, some of those, several of them of the stand polygons, there's little slivers that got split off from the parent polygon. And so they're separated. And so we need to go through an exercise. And it's going to take a while to kind of pull that back together, because whoever's managed this long term is going to want to have a really good, solid set of polygons with which to manage. And so you can't do that with 9,600 polygons and 2,500 of them being less than an acre. So that all needs to be cleaned up. So I just want to mention that to this group as something to flag. And Eric wrote a memo describing all this. So we have that sort of memorialized. So as we go forward with this group, with the services to the HCP, this will be a thing that might, as we clean it up, there might be some little adjustments in allocations. I think it'll probably all come out in the wash, but it's something that we're working through now, because as a manager, you can't manage with little bits and pieces around the forest. It just won't work. So that's kind of where we're at. I'd say looking forward, we're concentrating mostly on trying to develop and pull together these units. We're also working on the various sort of parts of the plan that are more template-like, that Eric and myself can start writing up as that's developed. And then there'll be sort of placeholders, and we can throw that all of our numbers in when we get the final sort of list of candidate stands going. And then we're going to have a draft hopefully available. Not sure if we're going to be able to get it done by the end of June, which was the target, but at least certainly this summer we'll get a draft ready. And I think we can pull that together pretty quickly. So I'll pause there. And Vicki, looks like you have a question.
Yeah, I was going to ask you when the draft plan, if it was still on task to be done by the end of June, which we're going to be in June in 2 more days. And like everything with the Elliott, we've got these plans and they kind of get extended just because of the nature of the beast. Can you share that memo from Eric? I wasn't aware that had been created. Yeah,
I certainly can. I'll get it to the group, or at least get it to Brett, and he can distribute it to the group, because it is it's a one pager. It's pretty simple, but it's definitely something that we have to track. And we're working on a process to make those fixes. We'll always have this master data set that's tied to the HCP. That will not go away. It's not like we really end up needing to have a management layer, GIS layer, and accompanying data with that needs to be what is managed with in the future. But we'll always have this backstop of what was agreed to in the HCP. That won't go away.
So the HCP required the polygons to be that profuse?
Yeah. So it's weird. I think what it is, and I wasn't behind the curtain on this one. So I think this is iterations from OSU in with ICF. And as maybe the allocations changed slightly, then it became this slice and dice with these different stands. There could be other explanations. I'm not really sure what happened, but it's like it really raised our eyebrows. And Eric and I looked at this stuff, like, whoa, where did we come up with 9,600 polygons? The original management layer from ODF had around, I think, 1,900 stands. So it's just, that just needs to be cleaned up, because it gets really messy if you don't deal with that in the beginning. And so we need to make sure we get that process down to clean that up. So
Okay.
yeah, I'm not sure at all the background why that happened. And Brett, do you have
Alright.
anything to sort of that I missed?
No, I think that's helpful. And just also teeing up when folks on the advisory group here and eventual board would be reviewing a draft of something. And I mean, basically the high level is we're back to the river analogy or balls in the air analogy. I'll go with river. And we have multiple pieces of wood floating down the river, and we all want them to land in the right spot. But we're keeping multiple pieces, whether it's HCP moving forward, doing an FMP on a timeline that has us, working on a final document there at the end of or in October, while also working on this operations plan and then other pieces. They all interrelate, and we're trying to keep them all moving at the same time. And the intent is to have the operations plan finalized and adopted after the FMP, but also give it time for draft review, public review, board review, and recommendations so that when we launch into any management in 2025, it's kind of based on the right sequencing of the process and transparency and public engagement as well as board engagement. So I think what came to mind, Ryan, in that overview is just this is one key piece to being able to get the Elliott into working as a research forest, but it's interrelated with a lot of the other pieces in the river that are flowing, still flowing, and it's challenging, but
Yeah, and
we
Brett
got to do it
also,
all at once. I mean,
and
to keep it integrated.
a key part of this plan that we haven't tackled yet is going to be the monitoring. And so I'm hoping that as the HCP wraps up, and then hopefully work with ICF on developing and implement, I guess it's sort of an implementation and monitoring plan, but we need to be able to fold in what we're going to be monitoring in this plan as best as we can. And so that's got to be a key piece. And Eric and I have not looked at that yet. So hopefully there's parallel paths there that we can pull stuff in as we start to, because I don't know that we'll be able to put much in a draft about the monitoring yet until we get more, I guess, more help from the HCP side there. I mean, I can pull some stuff in, but there's some pretty specific things that we'll need some assistance on. And then the other thing I'd like to go back a little to what Bob said earlier, and that is not putting too much pressure on the harvest for revenue. And I think that's one thing that we have to keep in mind. We're going to put a lot on the table here, and I think there'll be, at least, a decent amount of harvest in these first 2 years, but it's not going to probably generate the revenue that would cover all of the growing costs. And so I do share the same concerns from my seat, because I can pencil in revenue based on what we have, kind of what we're thinking about in terms of the amount of harvest that would happen over the first couple of years. And we don't want to go into where it's like, oh, well, let's pull in this unit rather than that unit because we know there's more wood out there. We want to keep this as those two things separated as much as possible. And so we just got to keep that in mind, and that's going to be controlled on the cost side. And we do struggle with the fact that the fire costs are going to probably go up according to ODF, another 13% this year. So 2 years ago, it went up 25%. Last year, it went up 15%. And this year, I think it's expected to go up another 13%. And those costs that needs to be a legislative fix in my mind. We need help there. That's just brutal. It's on all the state forests. Private side, they only have to pay half that bill, and then they get subsidized from the general fund to pay the other half. So we've got that pressure. We've got the fixed costs of road maintenance and various other things. So it's not cheap to operate a forest before you even get into hiring the staff and everything else.
Well, you're right about those fire costs, Ryan. We're going to have a presentation from ODF about the forest lands they manage for us. and the fire costs are $1 million. So we're going to show a loss on our forest revenue for the past year for Common School Fund forest lands. It's just eating us alive, and the costs on the Elliott are very high as well. So it is a problem, and I don't know how the legislature is going to fix it. And we've already seen wildfires this season.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah,
I
to
see.
be continued and determined there.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
see
well-
Bob's hand.
Yeah. Yeah, and then let's go to the next phase of the update. Keep things moving.
Yeah, thanks for all the work on this, Ryan. I guess the only thing I really had to, only question I really have, or two things. One, I appreciate the idea of kind of going big and knowing that you're going to scale back. I think it's going to be really important to message that right, though, as we roll that out, so that so people get both of those pieces. It just doesn't look big. And because, again, I think we're trying to keep everyone on board here, and so I don't oppose that strategy, but I just think we got to be ahead of the game in terms of explaining it and putting it into context so that people stay with us on this. The RCA thinning obviously is one of the more controversial things. It's one of the more experimental things that we're proposing here, and just wanted to make sure that if we're going to start that in round one, that we really do have both the short and long-term research, because it should be kind of pre-research and post-research. I'm not exactly sure what it looks like, but just making sure that we have that really built in. I know you're working with OSU on it, but do we have that locked and loaded to the point where it's really ready to go? And maybe that's still just a work in progress.
Yeah, I think it is a work in progress, for sure. And I do, agree with you on the messaging as far as going. And I think what we're looking at too is that if we go and find a lot of different candidate units out there, we can also, the work that goes into those is not lost work. It can be punted to the next biennium. So whatever work we do put into that, we'll have some stuff that we'll just say on the shelf, sort of, and be able to have for the next time. But yeah, like you say, it's not like, let's go, cut half the forest. We're not going to be doing that. So it's just a matter of the messaging. I think is good to keep in mind as we go forward.
The other thing I want to remind folks is that's why we're doing carbon as well, to supplement the cost of this forest. The cutting trees isn't going to give us enough revenue to manage this forest, and we've known that since the get-go. So a carbon project is really integral to the sustainability of the forest.
I would just add to
that
that. I like the way you're thinking about that, Ryan, too, in terms of kicking things to the next one, because I think with an experimental forest, we're going to come up against places that are complex, or that we realize need more work, or actually this is a place where we should have been monitoring, whatever. And so I think that idea of kind of going big and then starting to tier them out and say, oh wait, this is actually not a year one, this is a year 3, will be helpful too. And if we go into it with that mindset, I think that'll be useful.
Yeah, so there's a lot that will be relevant to talk about there as the drafts come forward around operations planning. And one thing really, this is actually relevant to the next update on partnerships. On the riparian thinning, this is something where in the context of a research forest and what we do right out of the gate, we're still playing out the question of, okay, who's the lead research partner on the forest? DSL's not. DSL's a manager. We're not a research entity. We need to keep playing that question out. But in the context of where we were talking with OSU around demonstration projects and what we would actually be trying to demonstrate with early management, there's a lot to be learned there through learning by doing around early implementation, and some of those principles that we talked about back last fall, or even earlier than last fall, around, what are we actually trying to demonstrate with early management, they remain true. And then on the riparian thinning, I wanted to mention that one thread in all of this has been Gordy Reeves, who's researcher and scientist who's been central to the aquatic strategy planning on the Elliott and was, working within the OSU team space. And we are working on finalizing the contract to have Gordy on board with DSL to continue the work around the aquatic strategy and the riparian thinning kind of early phase implementation thinking, knowing that we have a window of time to do those, but also a phased approach of starting small and learning as we go. And it's just having that level of expertise as kind of a through line in the planning effort while we're still working out the research entity phase has seemed real important. So we're excited to keep things going with Gordy. So other partnership conversations, I wanted to shift to this and then we'll move into the FMP. We're in continuing conversations with various tribes. So there was a letter that went out that Vicky sent to all 5 Western Oregon tribes related to, we're pivoting from where things had been in late 2023 around OSU management to DSL management of the forest. We're pivoting from HCP to a focus on the forest management plan. And the intent of that letter was to update, but also reach out intentionally to the 5 Western Oregon tribes around the FMP space being really an important one to playing out Indigenous interests and values on the forest. And we wanted to be reaching back out to all tribes and soliciting engagement at the level that the tribes want, and making sure that there's clear interest around this forest being a place where Indigenous interests are integrated with broader interests in science and management and research on this forest. And so those conversations are ongoing, and we have a consultation ongoing with the CT Klutzy. And then Vicky and I have been doing various calls at the staff and kind of director to chair level with different with the 5 Western Oregon tribes. And Vicky, I wanted to just pause on that to see if you had anything to add. It's part of the partnership conversation on Indigenous interests, but it's different in that we're working with tribal sovereigns, and we want to give that partnership space and those conversations enough space to really develop, recognizing that working with tribes is both unique and not at a level of working with stakeholders per se. So Vicky, anything to add there on that update?
Yeah, so I did meet with, so what I've been doing is meeting with the chairs. And I did meet with Chair Nieper with the CT Klutzy, and they still would like to be included in conversations. And so we'll just keep including them. And if they participate, they participate. I did meet with Chair Kennedy with the Grand Ron. She would like us to come back out and meet with the tribal council. We've done that, I think, twice before. And so they're on a trip to DC themselves in the next couple weeks. So when that, we'll schedule that sometime in mid-June. Still working on an appointment with Chair Pigsley with the Silettes. And then I spoke with Chair Mead yesterday. She was the one phone call I accepted yesterday for work, and had a great conversation. And I've not yet connected with the Cow Creek, though I understand Brett's been talking with staff. So I'll continue that work. It's always enjoyable, and a chance for me to be one-on-one with the tribal chairs.
Thanks, Vicky. That's great. And yeah, Mike, anything to add on your end or any other? I see Jack's hand went up. Maybe I'll look to Mike first and then see Jack, go to you next.
No, nothing particular to add other than finding a time to meet with the chairs of any tribe is always a challenge. They're very busy with a lot of balls in the air all the time. So
Yeah, Chair
if there's
Mead
anything I can do to
yesterday.
help with that, let me know.
Yeah, Brenda, Chair Mead yesterday said, Vicky, I apologize for not getting back to you. We are so busy. And she rattled off all these things they're involved in, and it's a lot. And so they're just as busy as I am. So it does take time to find time in our schedules. So thank you.
Yeah. Jack.
So, I'm just wondering, I'm just thinking off the top of my head that two things that we've obviously struggled with are how to get kind of research going and then how to get the tribal integrated into the forest in more extensive ways. And one thing that seems to be common about Elliott with a lot of other things going on around the country right now in terms of integrated management is how do you get this indigenous knowledge integrated with maybe the latest research findings in terms of on the ground management. So I'm wondering if, and I'm not sure, I haven't thought this out thoroughly, but whether we could get some sort of a DSL to ask the tribes for a research proposal on really integrating traditional knowledge and sort of current research findings in terms of on the ground management, whether it's prescribed fire or forest, other kinds of forest management or whatever. And it seems like if we could get the tribes to pull together a research proposal in this vein, that it could help us in a number of ways. And we might be able to actually get think about some longer term research with the tribes and really address that question of how do they fit in with on the ground management, and how do we get maybe some longer term research projects going, while we still have some flexibility. So, I don't know if in your various conversations with the tribes, if they would be receptive to that idea of either a multi-tribal research proposal or a single tribal proposal on this idea of, what does it look like on the ground to really try to integrate traditional knowledge with current research findings. Because that's a question, again, that's so many people I think are struggling with, and this looks like a great place to really experiment with it and try to see what it looks like. And so just thinking out loud, but just wanted to throw that out.
Yeah, I think it's great. A great thought, and it kind of builds on from the get-go around the development of the research forest concept and then the principles tied to it. One of those principles is around integration of indigenous interests and values, and I think in the OSU FMP, it did a really good job in talking about the opportunity on the Elliott to integrate or braid Western science with indigenous management and research, and how that actually plays out and looks. I'm curious, if Mike or others have any thoughts on it. I mean, from our end, that would be great, Jack, I think. And it would be welcome. And we actually talked in DC with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service related to the funding streams there around like, okay, well, everybody's living in a world of limited means and budgets. And that's, for Fish and Wildlife Service, you've got interest in species and habitat, but there are also interests in federal trust responsibilities to tribes and engaging with tribes and, you know, relatively new executive orders around all that, and exploring an opportunity to do that kind of a generation of like a consortium or some set of tribes working together on, you know, what would research, but also research tied to management approaches look like on the Elliott. I think could be really interesting. It's just every tribe is unique. We as a state, I think, would love that kind of a partnership, but we're just one piece in this, and we're working with tribal sovereign nations who are working on multiple different fronts, and I think need to decide whether and how they might want to do that. And I mean, fostering that kind of a discussion, though, seems great. And I don't, what do others think? And Mike, I mean, do you have any flavor to add on what
Yeah,
Jack's bringing up?
sort of that idea of a, you know, request for a research proposal from the tribes. I mean, the tribes could partner with, you know, OSU or whoever, but really kind of specifically asking about, you know, let's do some research on how this traditional knowledge integration with you know, latest research, what does it actually look like on the ground? Can we produce some of the things that we want to produce in somehow a better way with this sort of approach, and specifically ask the tribes to pull together a proposal for that?
That'd be interesting. I can get my successor to work on that. I won't be around for that part, at least not as my current position anyway. Yeah, I struggle with you know, setting it up as a research proposal. I think that the tribes might be interested in, you know, in whatever is proposed out there for whatever types of harvest. You know, how can some more traditional ways of doing things meld in with those? And I'm not sure if it would be a specific research project itself or more integration into everything that's going on out there. And I'm just trying to think of how everything would all work in that. But yeah, it's an interesting idea.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting this is sort of a replacement of all the other discussions that are going on, but rather a way to kind of maybe kickstart something that could actually, you know, get to the ground relatively kind of sooner than later.
Yeah. Any other? I mean, Melissa, I'm glad you came on the screen, and wondering if it was intentional. I'm curious if others have thoughts on or reactions to the idea.
I think it's an interesting idea. I think my experience with the tribes has been that, you know, like everybody, their staff time is very limited and they're already very stretched. I don't know if anyone would take us up on that just for that reason. I don't know that I've heard the value proposition for them in this proposal. I hear a value for us. And I don't know if they are willing to allocate their limited staff time to complete a research proposal.
Yeah.
It's what
Yeah,
they
and
do ask universities because that's what they do for a living.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Chairman talked to me about yesterday, that they are so busy. And they have a lot of their own forest to manage. So I don't know, Jack, it's a conversation worth continuing. But yeah, it is a lot to ask.
Yeah, I think it's a good segue actually into the, well, I'll cover this now instead of in the FMP part of this, but I mean, part of what we're trying to do is making sure we're holding open the opportunity and the interest and the intention around the Elliott being a place where Indigenous interests and values can be played out and expressed and restored, and it's part of an equity conversation as well, given the history of the Elliott and or that the landscape and Indigenous people in that landscape, and how we do it involves tribes having or seeing I forget what you said, Melissa, but basically seeing what's in it for them. And that's I think really what we're trying to get at in some of the conversations that Vicky's been having and that I'm trying to have at the staff level is like, okay, there's an interest here in doing something on the landscape in partnership with tribes and advancing Indigenous interests, but obviously it's not for us to say, you know, as a state, it's for tribes to also be saying, and here's what it would look like, or here's what it would mean to us to feel meaningful and kind of worth our engagement. So we're trying to play this out. On other anything more on that before I shift to one quick other partner update? Okay. And then getting into the FMP, we'll go there next. So really quick on the other partnership updates. On the Oregon State University side, we are still talking with College of Forestry and Oregon State and keeping communications going around the research partner question. And in that space, one, I think, important update that we'll probably bring back to you more as things get fleshed out a bit more is in the early phases of management on the Elliott, there's also baseline monitoring and data collection needs on the research forest, and OSU had started on that. OSU also has a significant amount, I think 3.5 million in state and private forestry federal dollars tied to research equipment and monitoring on the Elliott landscape. And all of that money has a time window on when it can be used. And I think the helpful part of the conversation and the update here has been, you know, OSU has said, yeah, we recognize that the money is there and it came to OSU. And even though we're playing out the question on where everything lands related to research partnership, there's this federal money that is dedicated to the Elliott landscape and collection of data and monitoring equipment related to it. And so OSU's been working on putting together a plan for setting up a lead person as well as on the ground kind of equipment placement, purchasing, and deployment for baseline data collection on the Elliott. And you know, I think just for folks to reflect on it, it's the baseline data that's often been referred to as like, here's the gold in the research forest, because you need the baseline to compare any future research against. And it's been a helpful, I think, development in seeing that money deployed in a way that's going to be, I think, meaningful and useful in the research forest context, and helpful to OSU as well, and then helpful to us in our startup fund conversations, because we're looking at going to state and private forestry for additional funding asks tied to the Elliott because of a good fit. And until, you know, we've got a plan and an approach to spending down the money that's already come from that funding source, it's awkward to be asking for more. So movement on this front's been good and helpful. So with that, let's shift to the FMP, and then I think we're gonna keep the next agenda item after the FMP, both this and the next one, fairly brief, and then get to public comment. But
Hey, Brett,
after the FMP, we'll touch on the June 11th land board meeting at a pretty high level. But given what we said earlier with ongoing conversations with the land board offices, we're going to need to keep it at a high level while we play those conversations out tomorrow.
a quick question for you, Brett, on the baseline data collection. So is that a long-term relation? I mean, there's the baseline, but the baseline continues to have to be monitored as it evolves too. So is there like is there anything we can see that kind of shows a subset of work that they're on contract for to do or granted to do? I'm just curious, because that seems like a place where, it'd be helpful for the board to be kept in the loop as to kind of what the agreements are and how long they go and what exactly it's for, because there was a lot in that baseline data too. I assume not all of it's getting done at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, the 3.5 million that exists won't cover all of the needs related to monitoring and baseline, and then how to keep it going over time. So yeah, the short answer, Bob, is we're working on a draft that would probably evolve into an MOA or an MOU between DSL and OSU around how these funds get deployed. And then a plan for doing it is also part of what we're working on in the context of also working on the FMP and the operations plan. So this is one of those pieces of wood in the river. So we would bring, when we have more on it, this is a fairly recent conversation. So when we have more, we would bring it to the board and talk more about it because of what you said, like that it's relevant to how this all integrates with the Elliott. So, all right, FMP.
Sorry, that was Mike. I just want to say, I thought we were having a very good conversation about that 2 meetings ago, in terms of different pathways we could potentially take. So I just want to make sure that really does happen so that we're part of that picture, and it's not something that, sort of slowly evolves. And then at some point it's a done deal and it just is what it is. So.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, yeah, I think we view it as this is part of the oversight structure and our commitment to the board and what we bring forward. This would be part of it. Okay, so I'm going to talk high level on the FMP. So basically, we're at a point of being ready to put out a public draft forest management plan. We're having conversations to be sure land board offices are all aligned around it, and want to be having conversations with you all around it, and where it goes. I mean, it will be a draft that evolves from draft to final over the course of June through October, and part of I'll go through some high level points on it, and then ask Allie to kind of help out in talking through our process timeline a bit. But I think in terms of a starting place, I wanted to first recognize that we were given a really good product with a lot of good work behind it in the form of the OSU FMP, and that had gone through kind of years of vetting and work within the prospective board, advisory committee, and advisory group context. And then a lot of public process around it as well. So we had a lot to build on, and it was also a huge document. So we're thankful to have that as kind of the base to build on and something to revise. And we've done the work to revise it into a DSL FMP. I think the high level points are recognizing in there, and this relates to the Indigenous interest conversation that we just had. There are going to be certain things where we need to provide time and space for further conversation and playing out exactly what things look like. And that includes the conversations around advancement of Indigenous interest and culture on the Elliott, and conversations with any of the 5 Western Oregon tribes that want to kind of directly engage in shaping that. There's also the the recreation plan and the education plan, where those would be specific plans tied to the Elliott that we don't have and we don't have done yet. And so the FMP will placeholder those 3 areas as, we're advancing the base FMP now that DSL would adhere to. And we're planning on these conversations continuing forward and then coming back with updated chapters in the FMP as those spaces have time to play out. So I think the other high points, and this conversation will play out with the board as well as the broader public, tribes, and other government agencies and stakeholders over the next few months. But we're recognizing that a lot of what we're building on comes from what's been advanced in the past, including the 2021 Elliott research proposal. And so having a unifying research question and themes tied to that is still where the DSL FMP is. And we'd have all of that kind of unifying research question and themes are tied to shaping future management practices and policies in a relevant way that's beyond the Elliott's borders. And while we've retained the triad structure, meaning that different watershed allocations in a geospatial way, the approach in the DSL FMP is to advance more flexibility than what strict adherence to a triad approach would mean. So it's not precluding it. We're playing out the conversations around the triad approach and the conversations around the research partner issue with OSU, but the FMP is kind of recognizing some of the limitations, real and perceived, around the triad design and what strict adherence to it would mean, and intentionally advancing more flexibility in that. So that's part of where we're headed with the draft FMP. Another part is recognizing that DSL can manage the Elliott, but we're not a research entity. And so how our staffing structure and need for partnerships relates to that, as well as a science advisory committee and the governance structure, would relate to recognizing that we need to bring in the research side of this is another part of what the FMP intentionally does. And then there's some areas, I'm going through some high points before we get into the process. The DSL FMP really focuses on, and this hasn't been, it's not something new, but it is a more focused advancement of the role that this forest can play in the state policy objectives and plan commitments related to climate and carbon, as well as biodiversity, and then related management for those values and research. And so it's the plan more expressly articulates the connection between the Elliott and the state's climate change and carbon plan, as well as the role of management and research in both demonstrating and researching what forest management could mean in the context of the changing climate and pressures related to this. And that's, I think, much more pronounced in here, including the flexibility for longer rotation forestry in the intensive allocations, as well as biodiversity contributions from complex early sterile habitat. That habitat biodiversity needs are not all about old growth. There's also a big role for a complex early sterile. And then the potential new designation related to achieving those biodiversity and carbon objectives across a broader acreage, looking at the partials and some within the full research watersheds, but not having that designation be, it wouldn't be subject to intensive management, but it would be able to be managed more flexibly than the CRW. And that's in part to allow more conversations to happen around different ways of achieving biodiversity and carbon, including through indigenous management or ecological forestry approaches. And then the last bit I'll mention, and computer battery is about to die. Last bit I'll mention is around self-sustainability of the forest and that principle of the forest being self-sustaining, including the commitment around 17 million board feet within a 4-year rolling average with up to 20 million in any given year within there. That commitment is still there in the context of economics and community benefit, but through forest products and related research, but also around the self-sustaining principle. And so is the commitment to advancing a carbon project, both in the context of the state's broader goals around carbon sequestration, as well as the relevance in the context of diverse revenue streams on the Elliott. And so it's not one versus the other, but integrating those two revenue streams of timber and carbon on one landscape in the context of also having an HCP and also recognizing the startup costs that we need to tackle. The FMP speaks to this in the meantime. So a lot of what's, I'm going to stop here and make sure my battery doesn't close out on me, but a lot of what's in here or in the draft that you'll see is relevant to, I'm hitting on some high level highlights, but a lot of what's in the draft also incorporates and maintains what you all saw in the OSU FMP. So with that, I'd like to turn it to Allie real quick to talk about our timeline and kind of process for engagement coming or moving forward. And Allie, I don't know if you're ready. I'm going to mess with my battery real quick and make sure I don't disappear.
Sure thing. Can y'all can hear me? Yeah? Okay. So good morning. We are still on morning. I am Allie Ryan Hansen. I'm DSL's communications director. I use she, her pronouns. As Brett, I think I heard Brett mention this at the start of the meeting, we're going to be contracting with ICF to execute the engagement process. But I can walk you through the broad strokes timeline and a few considerations for how the engagement happens. So those considerations are people need to have enough time with the plan. We are aiming for a 45-day at least comment period, and that we want to engage the public as well as do some targeted engagement, tribes, other government agencies, groups. We want to have multiple opportunities for folks to learn about the FMP, to have conversations, to provide input. And then, there needs to be sufficient time to review and address and incorporate what we're hearing from folks. And then finally, we want to weave that into the overarching governance structure. So the board, the Elliott State Research Forest Board, hears what was heard, how it's being addressed, and can have conversations with them about that. And then ultimately, the land board as the approver, that they're confident in how we've engaged and see that the process has been meaningful and robust and the outcome good. So does anybody have any questions about considerations? Jack, I see your hand. No? Why do I see your hand? Okay, weird. Teams is having there's a ghost in the machine here. Okay, well then I will go over the broad strokes timeline, which is the draft will be published in June. Ideally, we'd announce the comment period and other participation opportunities at that same time. But that may not sync up with the reality of contracting. And we know we want to get it out there. You know, it's not ideal. We already ask a lot of people when they give us their attention and when they give us their time. And so we want to support their participation with clear, complete information from the get-go, and not take their time because our ducks aren't in a row. Or I guess, you know, because our marble merlets aren't in a row. But with this, you know, reality, we get that. And then we'd be looking at a June to August, roughly, timeframe where we'd be doing the public engagement, doing other engagement, and then be reviewing and addressing and having the revisions ready through August and September, and then have the final ready in September and late September, and having the FMP presented to the land board in October. Any questions about that? Okay, that was everything I had. Did we lose Brett?
I think his computer was about to die and he was going to try to plug it in or try some other mechanism to get here.
Yeah,
He
I
may
don't.
have lost he may have lost the race because I don't see him anymore.
And I don't see a text message from him either. So, okay. Well, let me take over the rest of the meeting then. So does anyone have any questions of Allie about the process for going through the FMP? And clearly we're going to have more than 45 days. But, you know, I'm never one to say we don't need more time. He did tell me that it was less than the number of pages that OSU had. So Bob, you can breathe a little easier on that. It was a lot of pages. But, you know, to be fair, a lot of it was appendices and charts and whatnot. But we have streamlined the forest management plan. Okay, then I think that does it for that section, unless Bill, you have anything to add, or Ryan from the department?
Nope.
Okay. All right. So the next thing on the agenda is the June land board. I already talked about that, and the intentions of the board, and then planning our next board meeting. I think we'll just decide that after the land board appoints the board on June 11th, and we'll do a doodle poll and see when we're going to meet up next. And I think right now then it's time for public comment. So we'll get started with public comment. If you are a member of the public on the call, and already Bob Zyback has raised his hand. So Bob, you can put yourself on video now and ask your questions.
Okie doke. Well, I just had two things, and I put them in the comment section. The first one is that our nonprofit worked with Southwest Oregon Community College for 7 years on the Elliott. And one of the main things we did was to turn out a recreation plan, which focused on the roads and trails of the Elliott. That was done over a 2-year period with the students. And Department of State Lands has never even acknowledged that plan or that work, much less considered it. So I think with your reforestation plan and budget, you should consider the work that's been done already by community college students. The second thing is, after 5 years, we've now got 9,600 polygons. Oh my God. That had to cost a lot of money, and that's a distraction. That is not planning, that's computer games, and I think something needs to be done about that process. So those are my two comments. I put them in the message center, and if anybody's got any questions on either of those two things, I can leave it at that.
All right,
So-
thank you. Thank you, Bob. I did see those in the chat. Brett, you're
Yeah,
back
and
among
Vicky, it
us. We
sounds like
moved
you moved
on.
this into the public comment.
Yeah, we were
Is that
done.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, my battery did die. I'm back on the phone. Yeah, and Bob, really quick on we are recognizing those things that run the Southwest Oregon Community College and planning that you and others have done around recreation and education, as well as the work there in the FMP. So I hope we can continue to build on that.
Well, I think the problem is that there's not been a single, this is the first acknowledgement from you that we even did that work. We have other problems with the Appendix J in the OSU plan, talked about tree rings, but I personally did a public document 30 years ago on the fire history of the Elliott that isn't even cited. So not recognizing work that's been done earlier by myself or by our organization seems to be an expensive oversight. A lot of this stuff is reinventing the wheel, or at least we could build from what we've known and done already, which involves thousands of hours of volunteer work, dozens of students, and 7 or 8 years. So.
Yeah, okay. Well, and I think that's part of the draft FMP process is we'll put it out. It is a draft. We want to try to get things right or better than your sense of what's been done in the past. And then if it's not, that process is intended, like, let us know, because our intent isn't to ignore good work that's been done.
Well, we've had 7 years, so if we can start coordinating now, better late than never.
Yeah.
So far, it's been totally ignoring everything that's been done, and that's 100%. So it'd be good to change that pattern.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Anyone else have any comments today? Let's see. I don't see any other comments.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Who's speaking, please?
This is Fergus McLean.
Oh, hi, Fergus.
Is that you, Vicki?
Yeah, it's me.
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that early on when this process got started, I had a conversation with the lead of NOAA or whoever the Fed team leader was, who told me that murrelets can be protected by carbon reserves. And as you know, once murrelet reserves are established, they're no longer eligible to become carbon reserves. This means that all the protection of carbon of murrelets can be sold as carbon, which sort of would change your process, but would have no impact on harvest at all. It would be net gain. And so that would require an exhaustive murrelet survey and then designation of those murrelet territories, which overlap almost entirely with old timber, as carbon reserves to satisfy the Endangered Species Act. This is net benefit that would be simply lost if it's not done. So a pretty elementary step. And the other, which sounds like you guys are starting to address, is the importance of the development of the science of ecological forestry and the need of the people of Oregon to understand the difference between industrial forestry and ecological forestry and the economic, ecological, and social impacts of those in broad replications of studies across the landscape. So with that, good luck to you all. Thanks.
Thank you, Fergus. Good to hear from you.
Good to hear from you
Great.
too, Vicki.
Anyone else? Bob, did you have something else? Your hand is still up.
Yeah, I don't want to interrupt public comment though. I did have a final question.
Oh,
Since that's-
yeah, that was,
No,
it was
I
Bob,
think,
Bob Zybeck who had his hand still up.
Yeah.
Bob, let me ask Bob first. Bob, are you done? Did you just not lower your hand?
I think it's Macintosh. I don't show my hand being up. I was.
Oh, okay, yeah, I know, Macs and these machines are different. So, okay, well then, that's
was-
okay. We'll move on. So the other Bob Salinger had a comment because there's no one else with their hand up, Bob Salinger for public comment. So what can we hear from you? Bob S.
Yeah, and again, I'm sorry if I missed this earlier. This is during Brett's update when I got sidetracked. On the candidates for the board, the last time we worked together on that and kind of had a consensus slate, which I thought was pretty impressive actually for these kinds of things. And I'm just curious if there's going to be that kind of interaction on this one as well at all.
I don't know what you mean.
When we appointed the first board of directors, there was just a lot of work that went into that to kind of make sure that it was balanced out and that we had a group of people. This is back when the official board was appointed a year ago. And I'm just curious if this is going to be really an internal DSL and then land board appointment process, if there's going to be any sort of interaction with the existing board to kind of figure that out. If you recall, I think the legislation actually had language in there about making the board making recommendations as to who be added.
Yeah.
It's defunct.
Well, yeah, that's gone now. Well, we did the outreach. We opened it up for public, the public's ability to apply. People did apply. The land board is now reviewing those applications and whether they want to go beyond those applications. So I don't, there won't be a conversation with you all, other than I know that all of you have asked to be on the board again, and I've heard nothing from the land board telling me that won't happen. So it's just the additional members.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and again, I guess I don't want to lose the spirit of what we had a year ago, because I thought, the appointments, as we all know, especially on natural resource boards, are always usually contentious. And I thought it was a minor miracle, but also a reflection of the work that we had done, that we actually came up with a slate that was, basically universally supported by the folks that have been participating on the stakeholder committee, but also by the constituencies that were out there as well. And I just wonder if there is a way to continue to maintain that kind of inclusion, because it worked well the last time. And there was some interesting discussions that occurred, just kind of say, well, what are we missing? Are we hitting it quite right? Does it feel kind of balanced? And those went very well.
Well, I think generically you can have those conversations, but I don't think it's appropriate for us to bring the names forward. I mean, you can see them, but I don't think it's appropriate to discuss the names and in a public setting. That's really for the land board to do. But you can certainly talk about where you think the gaps are. We certainly know where they are.
Well, and I think Vicky, what I'd say on this is we did have the conversation, Bob, across all of the advisory group or committee members around like who do you think would be a good candidate? Where are we lacking? And we followed up with all those folks as part of the outreach process. I can't say every one of them put in an interest form, but I feel like we did have that back and forth. And my sense is this is part of what we need to tie off with the land board offices and continued conversations before June 11th. But we'll have it'll be known to the public kind of what the slate is moving forward. And my sense is it'll be, there will still be appointments to be done after this initial round. And so that question of where do you all think there are gaps in experience or the full complement of experience and backgrounds is relevant? And I've been having some conversations with folks, with you all individually around that. And I mean, it feels like timber and timber related operations is one, research is another. And, Mike is retiring, but we're trying to have this conversation with tribes without treating them as stakeholders as well, but extending interest. And so I know we're at the top of the hour almost, but we do want to have that conversation with you all about where you think the experience and background kind of gaps are on the board. And I'm trying to, what I just said, I think reflected some of what I've heard from you all.
Yeah,
Well,
we
it's
did.
tough-
We got recommendations from all of you. We followed up on those recommendations. And I think this initial appointment will be the minimum, the 7, and then go from there. Oh my God, the wind. Okay.
We also lost local environment to add to your list there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are aware.
All right. Well, I get it, and I think it's challenging, but I also just want us to be up to the challenge as well. I mean, seriously, I think this forest is not supposed to be business as usual, right? I mean, that's part of the big goal here, and I think it's easy. And I'm not saying we're doing this here, but I think it's easy to default back to business as usual, and that's not the way it's normally done. But if we want to maintain some of the collaboration we built, that requires, I think, being thoughtful about these sort of set pieces that lock in the status quo.
Yep.
Okay.
Well,
Thanks, Bob.
and then to
I'm very
round it
Vicky
out, there
today.
are action items on the land board agenda for the 11th, a couple of weeks away. They relate to the correcting their housekeeping largely. They're correcting some of the oversight. There was an oversight around decoupling of the portions of the 1000 road when the decoupling of the Elliott was done. And then the other one relates to the acquisition of Shutter Creek. So those are the only 2 actions in addition to the board appointments on June 11th. And then we are having an overview of the FMP process and timeline as well. But I mean, with this is our last meeting as a full advisory group before the actual board is formed. And so before we all hang up, Vicky, I just wanted to reflect back on that, and that, the next time you all get together, it would be as a board. Not all of you may be on it. I think most of you put forward, but Teresa, Jack did not. And Vicky, I just wanted to reflect on it's been an evolving process between advisory committee,
6 years.
process, perspective board, and advisory group, and now we're moving on to an actual Elliott board. So I'm appreciative, and it's also been it's been a process and a long and winding road. So Vicky, I wanted to just see if you had anything to close on that, or if any others on the group did.
Well, I learned I'm not going to make any promises about it's a 1-year commitment anymore. Because it's been 6 years, and so we've had most everyone has stayed on. We had a few drop off, but we couldn't be this far. And I think when I get a chance to read the article about the contrast between New York and Oregon, we're going to see how much more involved we have been, and it's good. So I look forward to seeing most of you after we're done with the land board appointments. And just appreciate all your time. It's a lot of time.
I'd like to.
Yeah.
Sorry, Vic. Yeah, I'd like to just express my thanks to Jack for his willingness to share the chair with me, and all his his terrific insight, and I've really appreciated that. And I think the whole Elliott has benefited from Jack's presence.
So, well, thanks very much, Keith, and everybody. And yeah, I wish you the best of luck. And you'll probably still hear from me on occasion, or I'll be around if you want to talk and chat. I know I'll probably continue to talk to Brett now and then. So and Keith too. So yeah, best of luck to everybody.
Thanks, Jack. And Keith was floating emojis while he was talking, which is a technical marvel that I've never seen.
I did.
Keith, so
If I did it, it was completely accidental. So don't give me any credit for that at all.
I can guarantee you the students would know how to do that.
Yeah.
It was Peggy.
Oh, it's Peggy.
Oh. All right. That explains everything.
All
On
right.
that, thank you, everybody.
Okay,
And
thanks.
we'll
Bye-bye.
have a scheduler out on the first board meeting. So look for something from Linda soon on that.
All right. Bye-bye.